Good morning. Welcome. The Environmental and Public Works Subcommittee on Chemical Safety, Waste Management, Environmental Justice, and Regulatory Oversight hearing on evaluating alternative materials for single-use plastics will come to order. There is a saying that waste is a design flaw. Today we have an enormous volume of single-use plastics, from utensils to bottles, and an even larger amount of plastic packaging. Single-use plastics and plastic packaging are often not recyclable or biodegradable. They often end up, as the phrase goes, burned, buried, or borne out to sea. All that waste does represent a pretty large design flaw. Ideally, we would love for all of our products to be sold in 100% reusable containers or biodegradable packaging so we don't have this challenge. The damage done by plastic pollution has inspired many companies to develop alternatives to fossil plastic, often marketed as green or natural. Some of those alternatives are referred to as bioplastics. That sounds like a win for everyone. Companies get the benefits of continued use single-use items and packaging that is lighter and more durable than glass and aluminum. And in the most successful implementation of this vision, consumers would get the peace of mind knowing that the packaging or single-use item that is discarded is being reused or composted. But the world is more complicated than that. And it's exciting to see how many small companies are working to develop alternatives on the front end that can be recycled or can be reused. And hopefully out of those many research efforts and investor-funded laboratories, we'll have more alternatives. But the goal is to understand now, where do we sit at this moment? What alternatives exist on the front end? What is truly recyclable? What is truly compostable? Does it require special laboratories or special facilities to be compostable as opposed to a compost bin in one's yard? So that leaves consumers very confused about how they're participating in our consumer economy in the best, most responsible way. So today we have witnesses who bring expertise to bear on this topic. According to the World Wildlife Fund, which is represented here today, 450 million tons of plastic are produced each year, a number that is expected to triple between now and 2050. Plastics are made from climate chaos causing fossil fuels. They generally don't biodegrade, and they do break down into microplastics. And we've had testimony in this committee about the challenges of microplastics. The average adult in America consuming some 800 particles of microplastics per day are estimated to be a credit card worth of plastic per week that ends up in our blood, in our lungs, even in the breast milk that we feed to our babies. But also in these plastics are toxins that expose us to a number of endocrine disrupting chemicals. So that's certainly a challenge as we think about our various daily activities. Our hot coffee cup that we get from Starbucks, what is it actually lined with? And what is the result of those particles ending up in our body? We also have the production of plastics often occurring in frontline communities where it creates toxic pollution that endangers the health of the people who live there. So there's many aspects to this complicated world, and we look forward to learning more today, and in our panel of experts, we have Dr. Marcus Erickson, a marine scientist and co-founder of 5 Gyres Institute, which seeks to understand the extent of plastic pollution in our oceans and what we can do about it. He and his colleagues published a discovery of the microbeads in Great Lakes in 2013. That is an example where there was a very definable product, a very definable reaction, which was we can live without these microbeads in our cosmetics or skincare lotions, and now they're not there. So that's good. Also joining us is Erin Simon, Vice President for Plastic Waste and Business at the World Wildlife Fund, helping companies to reduce plastic pollution. She spent 10 years working as a packaging engineer, so knows a lot about the packaging side. And we're joined by Umberto Gravitz, founder and CEO of GSF Upcycling, which breaks down used plastics to remake them into new products. Thank you for the time, for sharing your expertise with the committee, and I'll turn it over to Ranking Member Mullen, Senator Mullen, for his remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman Merkley. I appreciate it. I thank you for allowing us. And Mr. Merkley has a long history of studying plastics. While we may not agree on the solution, we definitely are in search of a solution to a problem, and maybe just be coming from different angles. So I appreciate you having this hearing. I'd like to start by thanking our witnesses for attending this hearing. We appreciate you and for taking the time to be with us. It's a challenge, and it's sometimes thankless, and you're not getting paid. So we appreciate your time. Time is valuable, and you don't ever receive that back. And so I do appreciate each one of you guys for being here. As everyone knows, plastics exists in almost every aspect of our day-to-day life, from consumer goods to automobile parts to even building materials. While improperly managed, single-use plastics can contribute to our plastic waste issues. Certain types of single-use plastics provide essentially and invaluable uses for us, which need to be considered in discussing alternatives. Notably, a few examples of these single uses include blood bags, syringes to help modern healthcare remain affordable, and insulate food packages to maintain hygienic standards while reducing food waste. These uses play a vital role in our society, and if restricted, would have detrimental impact on our daily lives. The series of hearings has made it abundantly clear that banning plastic production is not a real solution. Rather than wasting our time talking about banning plastics or mandating alternatives that consumers don't want, we should be discussing real market-driven solutions. This includes state-of-the-art developments in advanced recycling. Anyone serious about addressing plastic waste should support advanced recycling. This promising technology can address plastics that cannot be recycled by traditional methods. It has the potential to turn the whole concept of single use on its head by converting previously unrecyclable plastics into valuable new commodities. Let's be clear, improving our recycling system is not only the solution, but is without question a legitimate solution that warrants all of our attention. We shouldn't just be you shouldn't just be taking my word for it, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to ask for unanimous consent to enter into the record two studies, one from the Department of Energy and one from the National Academies of Science.
Without objection.
Both reports demonstrate the potential value of commercializing scaled chemical recycling. That's why I'm very thankful to be joined today by Mr. Kravitz. I hope I said that right, sir. Kravitz? And Oklahoma, I'm pretty close from getting that right. Of GSF, Upscaling, who traveled all the way from Spain to be here with us today. That's a long flight, sir. I get upset having to travel back and forth from Oklahoma, so I appreciate that. GSS is an innovative chemical recycling company that can accept the most difficult to recycle plastics. GSS facilities can accept plastic ranging from single-use to sun-scarred fishing nets. It's exactly the type of, sir, you're exactly the type of person we need here today, because listening to you, we can really start getting serious about addressing plastic waste. And so I appreciate it once again. Innovation, not misguided regulation, is the correct way to move forward. I look forward to hearing from all of our witnesses today on ways we can facilitate this and look more serious about chemical recycling and commercial scales. With that, I yield back.
Thank you very much. Mr. Erickson?
Good morning, Subcommittee Chair, Senator Merkley, Ranking Member, Senator Mullen, and all committee members. My name is Dr. Marcus Erickson, co-founder and researcher at the Five Gyres Institute. Our team at the Five Gyres Institute has sailed around the world to study ocean plastic pollution, leading 20 expeditions across all oceans. We've collected thousands of samples like the one that's right here. And what you can see is that it's mostly microplastics. Now, we just recently published, about 6 months ago, a study looking at a 40-year trend from the late 70s until present of microplastic abundance in the world's oceans. And I'll show you a graph real quick from our published paper. In the first 25 years, from 1980 until 2005, this quarter century, The amount of trash in the world's oceans, it increases slowly, but since 2005, there's been this exponential increase to the point that today, we estimate 170 trillion particles of microplastic in the global ocean. And the point is that we need urgent action. Now, why does this matter? I want to tell you a quick story. A few years ago, I went back to Kuwait. I'd been there 30 years ago as a Marine infantryman back in the Persian Gulf War, if you remember those times in 1991. I returned there recently as a Marine scientist. Our team surveyed the Gulf of Arabia, but we also went deep into the desert, and we found a few camel skeletons. And I want to show you what I dug out of one skeleton. We estimate about 2,000 plastic bags in this mass in one camel's gut. And this adds to the thousands of organisms worldwide that are impacted by our trash. And the point I want to make here is that I've been, across oceans, our team at the Five Gyres Institute, across oceans, across deserts, in mountains, roadsides, and municipalities around the world. And we're not talking about, cell phones or car bumpers or blood bags. When we think of harm, we're talking about single-use throwaway plastics. They're ubiquitous across the globe. But solutions are clear. Well, first of all, we're not going to recycle our way out of this problem, but the private sector is rising to the challenge. Refill and reuse. Entrepreneurs in the reuse and refill economy are succeeding. They are successfully delivering products to consumers without packaging waste. Thousands of entrepreneurs are proving successful reuse and refill business models. At the same time, biomaterials are a promising innovation. Our team at the Five Gyres Institute have researched what happens when biodegradable plastic products are lost in real environmental settings. We wanted to understand, okay, do these biomaterials, how do they perform if they get lost in different environments? So we took 22 different kind of products. We're talking about, biodegradable bioplastic straws and cutlery and thin film from bags. And we put them into 6 environments. We put in the ocean in California, the ocean in Florida, the ocean in Maine, a forest in Maine, the Everglades, a desert in California. It's 6 environments over 18 months, a year and a half. And our findings are fascinating. So I'll show you this real quick. This is our study. We took 5 kinds of straws. And here you see, these are different kinds of biodegradable materials, PHA, PLA, PHB. And in 16 weeks, we found them. They function as a straw when they're used. If they are lost, they degrade within 16 weeks. Even this PHB straw, it matched the rate of degradation of a paper straw. Then look at film. We had several kinds of biodegradable plastic films, and we find that for 16 weeks, same thing, the biomaterial films are disappearing. They're degrading over time. This PHA piece of film in 16 weeks is practically gone. Then utensils, the same thing, 4 different kinds of utensils, the biodegradable materials, the PHA and PLA, they're practically gone, even faster than the bamboo, the wooden utensil. But if you look here, the polystyrene fork, the polyethylene piece of film, the polyethylene straw, they're as new as the day we got them. In closing, I'd like to say that the problem is getting worse based on our work in the world's oceans and lands around the world. We urgently need smart policies. Businesses that refill and reuse are thriving, and biomaterials are functional alternatives to some kinds of packaging. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Erickson. That is a fascinating display you brought. Much appreciated. Ms. Simon. Please make sure your microphone is turned on. Yep.
Thank you for that. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Ranking Member and members of the committee. My name is Erin Simon, and I'm the Vice President and Head of Plastic Waste and Business here at World Wildlife Fund. I want to thank you for the opportunity to testify today on such an important topic, one that has quickly become the top environmental concern for many Americans, and that's growing plastic pollution. Plastic pollution can be found in nearly every corner of the planet, from our city sidewalks to the top of Mount Everest. It is estimated, as you mentioned, that there is an enormous amount of plastic pollution, 11 million metric tons entering our oceans every year. That's about a dump truck a minute of plastic pollution. Plastic pollution negatively impacts more than 2,000 species of wildlife and places a significant toll on local economies, public health, and vulnerable communities. It also harms some of the world's most important ecosystems like coral reefs and mangroves. Unless we act now, as you mentioned, the trajectory of this will just worsen. We will double the amount of plastic we produce and triple the amount of it entering our oceans by 2040. It is undeniable that plastic is a versatile material that keeps our food fresh and our medications safe. However, we currently rely on plastic as a single-use resource in a linear system where products and packaging are created, used, and thrown away. The plastic pollution crisis has taught us that it is no longer economically, socially, or environmentally sustainable to prioritize the production of single-use products, no matter where they are made and what they are made of. All natural resources are finite, and we are taking these materials faster than the Earth can sustain. As we look to the future of innovation, we need to amend that broken system no matter what the material is. This means getting rid of those things we don't need, substantially increasing the reuse, recycling, and composting of plastic, shifting to sustainable inputs and alternative business models such as reuse, refill systems, and moving to alternative materials when appropriate. Alternative materials to replace plastic could include paper, metal, glass, or bio-based materials. However, no matter the material, we must always be thoughtful and thorough when considering the use of alternatives so we avoid those negative trade-offs. All materials have environmental and social impacts. It is critical that we take necessary steps to source and use alternatives that have stronger environmental and social benefits when compared to the conventional plastic. It is important to note, for example, that both virgin glass and metal have intensive extraction processes, so their overall sustainability performance is largely tied to our ability to recapture these materials through reuse and recycling. Of course, even as we look for solutions to reduce and replace, we might still need some virgin plastic, but it doesn't need to come from fossil fuels. Plastics can be made from alternative sources such as seaweed, sugarcane, and other plants. Bio-based plastics offer an opportunity to decouple from fossil resources, achieve greenhouse gas emission savings, and contribute to a resilient local economy when produced in accordance to best practices. To realize this potential, we have to follow a no one-size-fits-all solution for bio-based plastics. But we have to also follow a shared set of principles that can guide design choices around how they are grown and effectively recycled or composted. It is critical that we pay attention to food security, labor practices, deforestation, and land conversion, and impacts on water quality, as well as the necessary recycling or composting infrastructure for the recovery of these. Policy conversations around all material circularity continue to be essential, independent of any alternative material solutions. We need supporting infrastructure and policy to tackle the broken system. And that includes the systems to collect, reuse, recycle, and compost anything that is produced. In the United States, leading businesses are already setting ambitions around reduction, reuse, and recycling. I will actually be on a panel later today in this room with WWF and Coca-Cola, Walmart, and Mars, talking about the ambition we're seeing from many of the private sector, including calls for enabling government policies like extended producer responsibility. The United States has the opportunity to be a global leader in this. In the end, we need everybody to do their part. WWF hopes that today's conversation will pave the way for further development and implementation of robust policies in this space, policies that call attention to the considerations and advantages of reduction, reuse, and other plastic alternatives as we seek to address the problem of plastic pollution. A circular economy is only sustainable if we have a way forward when we're working together. It begins by reevaluating our use and disposal of plastic and moving towards a circular system that prioritizes environmental health and environmental justice. This reality may seem ambitious, but there are policies and changes and technologies we can use to move forward today and create that more efficient system with a healthy planet, for a healthy planet and future generations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Simon, and we're going to turn to Umberto Kravitz. Welcome.
Good morning. Chairman Merkley, Ranking Member Mullen, and members of the subcommittee. My name is Umberto Kravitz, founder and CEO of GS Upcycling. I appreciate the opportunity to appear before the subcommittee today. I will discuss three aspects of my company's innovation that enable true circularity in plastics. First, we can upcycle all types of used plastics back into feedstock. Second, we deliver substantial improvements in energy and environmental performance of the plastic recycling process. Third, we create a strong economic incentive for communities to keep used plastics out of the waste streams and the environment. Our first breakthrough takes advantage of our proprietary graphene-based nanomaterials, commonly known as carbon nanotubes. By adding our material to tons of used plastic in a pyrolysis process, any municipal or industrial entity will now be able to upcycle the 80% plus of used plastics, including mixed, dirty, and contaminated plastics that are currently too hard to recycle and otherwise end up in landfills, incinerators, or lost to the environment. Examples of this include packaging material, so about 45% of the global problem, as well as medical devices, automobile parts, circuit boards, and even degraded plastics such as marine debris. We recently validated this in our demonstration plant using fishing nets collected from local fishermen. Our nanomaterials enable the process to occur at roughly half the temperature, 450 degrees Fahrenheit instead of 800 degrees Fahrenheit, and with a 30 to 60% improvement in plant performance, thus significantly reducing energy costs and associated greenhouse gases per unit of output. Just as consequential, our process also captures 60 to 99% of halogens, such as bromine, fluorine, and chlorine, as well as other contaminants of major health and environmental concern. These contaminants can then be segregated for responsible disposition. Our second breakthrough takes advantage of our proprietary mix of biological enzymes. By placing these enzymes in direct contact with used plastics, we can depolymerize plastic back into its original building blocks. And unlike any other enzymatic method, our process takes place at room temperature without the added heat or energy consumption, and without chemical-based solvent pretreatment that other enzymatic processes require. We have proven that our enzymatic process can not only handle plastics such as soda bottles, so PET, but also plastics that are otherwise expensively and or incompletely mechanically recycled, for example, styrofoam packaging materials or electronic plastic waste. We're currently developing similar enzymatic treatments for polypropylene and polyethylene packaging materials. The output of both of our innovations is a high-quality feedstock that can economically compete with new feedstock from fossil fuels. In other words, plastic back to plastic. Our midterm objective is to decouple plastic production from fossil-based sources. Just as important, it means that upcycling of used plastics can occur at a profit, creating economic incentive for local communities to construct affordable upcycling facilities to collect and convert all of their plastics into valuable feedstock at a net savings to their budgets rather than at a cost. In summary, our upcycling technology innovations are able to process all types of used plastics, including degraded plastics like marine debris, and produce high-quality feedstock that can readily be converted into new plastic. We can perform bioenzymatic upcycling at room temperature and can significantly reduce the heat needed for pyrolysis, driving substantial reductions in energy consumption and associated air pollution and greenhouse gas. And we can capture and segregate chemical contaminants in used plastics. For example, this is where PFAS would fall into place. Making used plastics too valuable to burn or throw away, we can help make plastic circularity a global reality. I want to thank you for the time and consideration of this testimony, and I look forward to your questions and comments.
Thank you to all of our witnesses. Much appreciated. I wanted to start out, Dr. Erickson. When I was a kid, we always referred to wax paper cups. Paper cups today are mostly not coated in wax, they're coated in plastic. Is there a particular reason that at least for cold drinks, we couldn't return to wax paper cups?
I see no reason why we couldn't return to some of those materials we grew up with. Same here, a wax coating on paper does function as a moisture barrier. So yes, we could. And actually, they still exist today. If you look at the packaging for like lettuces and cabbages in agricultural sector, you see wax-coated cardboard being utilized frequently as a water barrier.
Now I want to turn to your powerful display of what you found in the gut of a single camel, or from inside the skeleton of a single camel. I've seen similar displays from many marine species. Is it fair to say that if we're looking at the gut of, well, I think I've seen them for dolphins and sharks and so forth, that we also see a huge, often accumulation and marine birds as well in the oceans of affecting our wildlife?
We do see similar impacts of single-use plastics on other marine life, especially. I have many colleagues that whenever a whale washes ashore on the west coast of the United States, they do look in the gut, and they frequently find, plastic film, other objects, fishing gear sometimes. I got my start on Midway Atoll. I went there actually surveying history of the bases that were there, and I stumbled upon, hundreds of albatross skeletons, and just pulling out of them, there were bottle caps, cigarette lighters, all kinds of random fragments of plastics, a lot of this stuff. So yes, the impacts are not just camels in the desert, but here close to home, we see tremendous impacts.
Now, if these, it looks like mostly bags, I think you said, and
Yes, sir.
you pointed out in your chart for better alternatives, a variety of alternatives to plastic that biodegrade better, and you set those into different types of ecosystems to see in real life. And I think you said forests, deserts, and I'm not sure where else.
Everglades.
Everglades.
And 3 ocean settings.
And had those bags that you found in that camel gut, if they had been made out of these other materials, would they have biodegraded and not accumulated in the stomach in the same fashion?
I'm confident if these were made from some of these new polymers outside, the biodegradable polymers, that I would not have this here today, that it wouldn't exist.
But is it the case that some bioplastics, although they start from materials that are not fossil fuels, produce results that are very similar in the final product as with the fossil plastics?
Bioplastics is a very big umbrella. They're bio-based. You can actually take sugarcane and other materials and make polyethylene, polypropylene, PET. Then there is a whole group of biodegradable polymers, very different. It's a big umbrella. It casts a wide net of materials. The biodegradable materials are the ones that we studied here that do not persist in these 6 different environments that we tested.
So, Ms. Simon, so we have this big umbrella of alternative products, some of which biodegrade better than others. Has World Wildlife investigated and found that there are kind of advice for policymakers about what type of products might be a good substitute on the front end for single-use plastics?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So I would begin with, you have to look at a couple of things when thinking about bio-based and biodegradable materials. In regards to bio-based, right, we are sourcing it from something that grows, agricultural products. So you have to assess a different set of environmental and social risks and economic risks associated with that, right, around land use, water. But there are absolutely ways to assess that and mitigate that risk. It's just about understanding and addressing those up front. Now, if that feedstock or source of renewable resource is going into that bioplastic and it is designed to be biodegradable, it's our recommendation that it ends up in industrial composting, so in formal infrastructure. Because while these can often break down, it is concerning that it will just result in more plastic ending up in nature because people believe it will just break down. And it requires a lot of different criteria for something to break down. It has to have microorganisms, it has to have UV light, a certain level of humidity, and temperature is really important. And so you just want to make sure that you are designing materials for the infrastructure we have so we could get that material back, right? Circularity of materials is about driving towards another resource. And if you go into an industrial composting facility, you'd be able to get back resources like humus, like really nutrient-rich soil from that composting process versus just allowing them to be littered into nature.
So we've already gone through my 5 minutes. It passes very quickly. We're going to turn to Vice Chair Mullen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I got a series of questions, but I want to circle back. Did you say most of that is single-use plastics, sir? That's in the
Yes, Senator. These are all, that's why I cut it in half, the research paper they published, is that it's all plastic bags, mostly plastic bags, not large sheets of film.
Bags aren't recyclable?
I'm sorry? Is it recyclable?
Bags are recyclable, right? I mean,
Technically so.
that's what I thought, because I mean, we put them in recycle bins all the time, and we send them. I'm just saying, I mean, we take recyclable stuff all the time. Ms. Simon, you're shaking your head no, but I'm just saying, that isn't one of the things that DC says do not put in recyclables.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, they are technically recyclable.
Okay.
But they are not recycled. We do not have access, so most people cannot recycle plastic bags. It's problematic.
But it's not designated as single use, though. I mean, single use is some of your healthcare products, your stuff that you're not allowed to use. I mean, technically, I'm not getting into the weeds here. I'm just saying that I just find that interesting because I didn't know that. I thought we were recycling our bags when we put them in the blue bins all over Washington, D.C.
Yeah, they're highly problematic. They get gummed up in the system, yes.
I have no idea how you traveled back with that. I'm assuming you must have been flying commercial air because that would be a heck of a thing to have to check. A while ago when the chairman was asking about the stomach and the other products that would break down faster in marine life or in the camel's gut, Ms. Simon, you were shaking your head like, in fact, you bit your lip. So if I'm reading body language right, which I used to have to do all the time and I would say that you probably disagree with that a little bit.
So kind of talking about what I was highlighting before, materials breaking down is a very specific process. It requires a certain set of temperature, relative humidity, microorganisms,
Right.
oxygen. This is why a biodegradable material won't break down in a landfill, right? Because
Right.
and so that's the same issue in a gut, the type of bacteria.
So what I'm saying is you're not certain that the alternatives would actually break down. Because
That's why we recommend infrastructure versus hoping it'll work out.
This brings me back to my point about alternative recycling because, I remember when we had all paper bags and people's like, it's bad for forests. We don't want to be doing that. We need to get rid of plastic or paper bags and go to plastic. And plastic was the clean alternative. I think we all remember that. And so what I don't want to do here is have another solution that we think is the new solution, and we actually don't know it's accurate or not. I think we need to know because obviously we have two people here that disagree on if it'll break down or if it doesn't break down. But one thing that we can agree with is we can find an alternative to how to have single-use plastics become recyclable. And I think that's where we need to go back into, which, crevettes, did I say that right? Yep. Oh, good, I'm trying to get there, which is kind of what your company is trying to do, right?
Yes, we can actually upcycle all types of plastics, included degraded plastics. The technology basically enables to add what's missing to the mix. So we're not doing a pyrolysis, we're enabling a pyrolysis by guiding the carbon-carbon links within that scope. And in the enzymatic, we're breaking it down regardless, without energy or solvent retreatments.
And it's my understanding you're launching your first fully commercial developed GSF's carbon nanotube technology, is that
Yes.
right? It's coming out this month?
So we're working with Europe's largest advanced recycling facility, one of the best ones out there, actually. And what we're doing is enabling that process to have an optimized plant design that can be implemented at scale globally. Here in the States, we could bring that plant design and talk to local communities on their plastic needs, create value for that plastic before it reaches the environment.
So what milestones are you hitting to keep this technology from coming to the United States?
So we could start having conversations on bringing the technology to the States probably by mid of next year, once we have, so I like to be performance and data driven. So once we have that industrial scale plant up and running, then we can say, okay, what are the needs and the types of plastics we want to launch here in the States with, start having those conversations. We could talk about a licensing package for local communities where they say, okay, we have this amount, this volume, these types of plastics that we want to process, and do that at scale with a plant design that's already optimized at a 30 to 40 KTA volume.
I think this committee would be interested in knowing when that starts happening, what barriers you're facing, so maybe we could work together.
Okay.
One last thing, when I was growing up, WWF meant World Wrestling Federation, so it's totally changed my concept of what that meaning is now. So thank you all for being here. Appreciate it. I yield back.
Thank you, Senator Mullen. Chair Carper.
Thanks. As it turns out, we've been wrestling with this for a while. And one of the things I have a question, I'm going to ask a question in a minute of Ms. Simon on infrastructure for material systems. But first, just a question. I always look for where do we agree. It's easy to find disagreement around this place. But just very briefly, each of you, just what do you think is a major point where the three of you agree? Go ahead, Mr. Erickson, go first. Very briefly. Major point of agreement. I know you're probably stunned, but I'm looking for a point where the three of you agree on something that's important.
Where we both agree on something?
The three of you agree.
All three of us? Well, we agree that there's a need for urgent action to solve this problem, for sure. And I think we're also all in agreement that we need, that the private sector is stepping up to the challenge. I think where we might disagree is...
No, I'm asking where you agree.
Where we agree?
I'm asking where you agree. You've answered my question. Go ahead,
Yes,
Ms. Simon.
that's it. Thank you.
Where do you agree?
I think we all agree we need to start with reduction.
Do you say reduction? Mm-hmm. All right. Mr. Kravitz.
So I agree we have to face the challenge, and I think companies like mine are stepping up and developing solutions that can be scalable.
All right, good, thanks. Ms. Simon, here's a question for you, but I'm going to lead into it saying over the past couple of years, this committee has become, as you know, deeply engaged on a variety of issues, but one of those is material circularity. This includes improving our reuse and our recycling systems to ensure that valuable materials that could be turned into new products are not just being lost to our landfills or to pollution or, frankly, to incineration. Yesterday, along with Senator Bozeman, Republican from Arkansas, I co-hosted a textile recycling roundtable right here where you're sitting. And we talked a lot about where we agreed as folks from different backgrounds. And but Ms. Simon, in your testimony, you mentioned a similar situation where some bio-based plastics are compatible with existing recycling streams and others are not. Question: what supporting infrastructure is needed for recycling streams so that all materials are compatible? And what should the federal government's role be in establishing and scaling this infrastructure? Go right ahead.
I think what's really important is that we have criteria around what can go into our infrastructure. So whether it is coming from bio-based sources or other alternatives, that we have clear design criteria so that when that material ends up in the facility, no matter what the technology it is, it can be cleanly reprocessed in a way that can produce high-value secondary materials. And so for bio-based, that could be something coming from sugarcane and then going into a PET bottle, like mentioned, and then going into the recycling facility, or it could be a PHA going into a compost facility, but all designed for that infrastructure that's going into. So those design guidelines, and then following that, we need policies that set those guidelines and create a funding mechanism to make sure that there's financial sustainability for those facilities to keep recycling and composting that material.
All right, thank you. Question, again, for the entire panel, and we'll start off with you, Mr. Kravitz, and come to your right. All right, but you'll be our leadoff hitter on this question. You ready? Earlier this year, our committee meets right here in this room, Environment and Public Works Committee, unanimously advanced 2 pieces of bipartisan recycling legislation, unanimously, no dissenting votes. One of those bills is, I think it's called the Recycling and Composting Accountability Act, and it would require the Environmental Protection Agency to collect and to make publicly available data on recycling and composting rates across the country. That's what it would do. Question starting with you, Mr. Kravitz. Would you please share the importance of increased data collection on addressing the plastics crisis and considering material alternatives?
Yeah, so collection is key, of course, to avoid plastic from reaching the environment and the oceans. Then you need to set up all the infrastructure to move plastic and get this all set up to go to advanced recycling facilities that can handle every type of plastic, not just single waste streams. And that's important to understand. The ability to tackle all the plastics solves the problem of having to sort everything upstream.
All right. Same question, Ms. Simon, if you would, please.
We're proud to have supported the Recycling and Composting Accountability Act. We
Thank
look
you.
forward to working with the committee further on that. But we believe that transparency is key to drive change, right? Whether you are transparent in what you're making and how you can manage it, or in delivering on strategies, right? We have started up a program called Resource Plastic to have companies build some transparency into what they're making, what format it's in, where it goes in the world, and what happens to it. And that way they can really develop the right strategies to address their plastic waste footprint. So it means we can actually directly drive improvement on the impacts by having that transparency. It'll be the first key step in creating the plan for the U.S.
All right. Same question, Mr. Erickson. Very briefly, if you will. Very briefly.
I would also agree that recycling is essential. On the front end, designing for recyclability and compostability is essential.
Good. Thanks so much. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And now Senator Capito, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here today. Very much appreciate this. I'd like to ask Mr. Kravitz a question about it. I understand what you're doing would be under the term advanced recycling. Are you taking like single-use plastics and making them more advanced plastic materials, or how is that process without getting too technical?
Okay, thank you for the question.
Yes.
Advanced recycling is basically 3 families of technologies that take different types of plastics and bring them back to feedstock to produce new plastic. What my company does is, in the pyrolysis space, enables a pyrolysis to operate economically and efficiently by adding what we think is missing in the mix, which is a carbon nanotube. So that's one technology. A second technology is the ability to depolymerize, so break down any type of plastic into its building blocks so we can make new plastic again.
Can we do that now?
Technically, it's possible, yes.
Is it affordable?
Yes.
And so I guess my big question on all of these issues, because we have 2 recycling bills that we're hoping to get all the way through, and they're sort of, they're pretty easy. You know, I live in rural America, and we have a lot. We don't have the opportunity for recyclability through our municipalities too much. It's not widespread. How do we get this topic down to the everyday user of plastic? I know the big industrial users are probably the ones that we're looking at here, but how do you relate this very sort of technical issue to everyday people, whether they're in an ag community or a rural community? So I'll start with you, Dr. Erickson.
How do we communicate this problem, the challenges
Simply,
to rural America?
Yeah.
I think you can explain to people some of the human health concerns, and the research is coming out very quickly, showing the impacts of micro and nanoplastics. I think talking to people about the impacts on wildlife and the impact on their pocketbook, what the true costs are to try to capture single-use plastics and bring it back into a waste stream. So I think you can talk about the human health, the wildlife impacts, but also the bottom line, what it costs them and their communities.
All right, Ms. Simon?
Yeah, just building on that, I think in that communication, we help to educate them. We empower them with easy actions, right? Today it requires some sort of decoder ring to figure out what goes in your recycling bin, and it needs to be easier for them to be able to do it. So we need to design in more standardization to make it so that it's not up to the consumer to figure out how to recycle or compost their materials.
So if we're looking at landfills, for instance, which has all kinds of different waste going in, is there a movement now, and I'll get to you again on, Mr. Kravitz, on that first question. Is there a availability working with the landfill owners to be able to successfully separate out and make that an economic model as well?
Coming from landfills? Mm-hmm. I have not done that research to understand what would happen if we recaptured material from our landfills, but I will say there's probably a lot of high-value material in our landfills today, and considering how resource-constrained we are, it would probably be interesting to research that, but I don't have that data for you, I'm sorry.
Okay, Mr. Kravitz, I'll give you that question, that one I just asked, and then the one before, if you want to give me some, how do you translate this down to the regular consumer in terms of the importance of this?
So I do agree with what has been said before and educating the consumers. I do think, and the premise of my company is that plastic is valuable, and recycling companies, advanced recycling companies, will have to pay for plastic. So making plastic a reusable material avoids or changes the concept of being waste. So if you consider plastic waste, okay, so we're throwing it away. But if it has a value and it's reusable, then the mindset might change that we can actually start recycling. Then, of course, you need to build the infrastructure and start recycling and prove it at scale. But the shift in thinking of this as waste or used recyclable plastic, I think is key.
Well, if we look at what we've done with paper, I mean, paper is looked at as recyclable, I think, you know, when you see newspapers or any kind of paper. It used to be, when that started in the 70s, you'd see a little print on the bottom of your stationery, this paper is recyclable. That was like unusual. Now, we just, I think, I don't think we assume everything's been recycled, but a lot of it has been. Do you envision a time when plastics with advanced recycling could get to that point?
Yes, for sure. That's what's going on. I've been in this for a few years now. I've been going to different events throughout the world, and now the whole value chain is talking. And this is a massive collaboration between plastic manufacturers, transformers, brands, and advanced recycling companies. So I think we're getting there. Now the technologies have to scale. Companies like mine that have developed disruptive technologies on taking charge at all the plastics that can be recycled, not just single stream, I think will make a difference.
All right. Thank you. Thank you all.
Whoa, Senator Whitehouse.
Thanks, Chairman. Just for the record, I don't think plastic bags are recyclable in DC. They're not in Rhode Island. Plus, the recycling rate completely stinks. There are some plastics that go into the bin that are 0% recycled. There are others, I think the top is 20%, and the average is single digit, like 8 or 9% of what you actually put in the bin to recycle getting recycled. So it's very, very much a failed system, almost to the point where we put consumers into the role of being unwitting actors in a play in which recycling takes place, except at the end of the day, it's faux recycling. It doesn't actually take place. And when you look at the other side of the market, if you look at single-use plastics, we're lucky to hit 2% recycled content in how single-use plastics, disposable plastics, are manufactured. So clearly, both on the manufacturing side at 2% and on the alleged recycling side at 8 or 9%, these are catastrophic failures, particularly when you consider all the effort that's put into maintaining, I'll put quote marks, air quotes around it, recycling. So I think if it's going to change, the economic signals have to change. the moment it is cheaper to buy brand new virgin plastic and make your plastic bags and make your spoons and make your containers than it is to use recycling, and so hence 2%. If that economic signal shifts, then suddenly recycling works, because if there's one rule of capitalism, it's the profits imperative. And it's really uphill sledding for a company to make economic decisions that are against its best interest. So I think we need to, frankly, put a recycling fee on virgin plastic that is destined for single use. And that will balance the market, and that will also provide a good price signal to help companies like yours, Mr. Kravitz, to be able to have a better business model, because now people are really looking. If you don't send that price signal, then public pressure becomes really important. So thank you, Chairman Merkley, for holding this hearing. Thank you, Chairman Carper, for your leadership in this space, because the public pressure matters. I would single out Unilever, the enormous European-based company, for what I think at this point is the best corporate pledge so far, that kicking in 2025, they're going to take a kilo of plastic waste out of the environment for every kilo of plastic they put into the environment through their business. And that does, obviously, give them a big incentive to reduce the amount of plastic that they put out into the system and to look for alternatives. But it also creates a market on the other side, because they're going to have to buy plastic back. They're not going to send Unilever employees around the world to scoop up plastic themselves. They're going to create supply chains to get waste plastic off of the shores of countries where plastic is shin deep in the rack line of the coast because of so much coming ashore from the ocean. I remember landing in Bamako, Mali, with John McCain, and we were driving from the airport into downtown Bamako, and we went by a big field, and I turned to John and I said, "I've never seen so many crows in my life in a field. Do you think those are crows or ravens, or what are they?" Because there was thousands and thousands of things flapping out in the field. It wasn't birds at all, it was plastic bags. In Mali, the standard means for carrying things around is a black plastic bag. And this field was just filled with them, to the point where I thought an enormous flock of crows or ravens in the thousands had come in. When Unilever's pledge goes live, it suddenly makes sense for somebody to go out there and pick up all that plastic and take it into Unilever's supply chain. So I think it's really important that we add to this technical conversation an economic conversation about aligning the economic incentives, because otherwise charity isn't going to help. Incentives make the difference. Let me just ask Ms. Simon to comment briefly on that, and then I'll yield back.
Yeah, I agree. We need to create financial incentives in the system that will not only level the playing field for companies that are already out there trying to redesign and rethink the materials they're using, starting with reduction to be able to do that and move into reuse systems and into monomaterials that are easier to recycle and formats that are easier to recycle. That incentive will also, when they're paying for that through whatever policy mechanism, whether that's DRS or EPR, it pays for the infrastructure and the technology in the infrastructure to return secondary materials that are high quality, and that becomes the new supply chain for them, right? They can then pull that material and put it into their products and recycled content instead of having to go back and buy more virgin.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Senator Mullen wanted to ask a follow-up question on that.
Well, not really a follow-up question. I'll just put this whole debate about plastic bags being recyclable or not. According to zerowaste.dc.gov, plastic bags are recyclable. In fact, they tell you exactly where to drop them off. They tell you, their website says, quote, "Have you ever been unsure about which items can be recycled or which items considered too hazardous to put in the trash bin? With new where it goes tools, we can help take the guesswork out. Specifically, drop off plastic bags, wrap, and film. Drop off these items for recyclable of all bags, wraps, film should be clean and empty. To find the nearest drop-off location near you, please visit Plastic Film Recycling website. My point is, on all this, is they are recyclable. It's ridiculous that we don't know what's actually recyclable and what's first use and what's not first use, but yet we have all these solutions. Maybe we should start with what is recyclable and what's not. Start at that point, and then we can take a lot of the guessing out of it. Like I said before, plastic was supposed to be the new green when we got rid of paper bags. So let's not be too knee-jerk reaction here and do more damage instead of actually finding out a solution that's good for all of us moving forward. With that, I'll yield
I
back.
should have been clearer. I meant through the bin, the blue bin at the end of the driveway.
So we're going to continue some exploration of these issues. No one here has mentioned some of the exploration of using products made from, for example, there's folks working with mushrooms to be able to produce products, people working with seaweed. Dr. Erickson and Ms. Simon, are either of you familiar with those alternatives for single-use plastics, and is there promise there?
Yes, there is a tremendous promise. There's something Senator Whitehouse said about capturing some of the negative externalities on the back end. When these single-use plastics get lost to the environment, I call them the bags, the escape artists. They get out and they have true costs. While they are technically recyclable, there's such a cost to collecting them, sorting them, transporting them, landfilling them, trying to recycle them, as many get lost in the environment and cause harm. There are so many solutions on the front end that are mitigating those problems, capturing those negative externalities, like some of these biomaterials that we did study. And we did study these because we wanted to see what happens if they really get lost in different environments, in ocean environments, in land-based environments. And some of them really perform very well. Some, like the PHAs and PHBs, degrade as fast as wood and paper. But during their utility, they have the functionality as plastics, the water vapor barrier and packaging products. So there is promise with some of the new biomaterials. And again, I should say that bioplastics is a large umbrella. You've got the bio-based, but then some of the biodegradable ones, some of the new materials are very promising.
Ms. Simon?
Yeah, I think seaweed is especially interesting, right? Because it has some net environmental benefits to it. And so there's been a lot of exploration into sourcing of seaweed for feed, fuel, and materials. Today, there are converters of it, but there's nothing at scale that matches products, but it is something that is being explored. Mushrooms, too. There have been a lot of transport packaging from steel case, even explored in electronics companies because of its cushion properties, where they can use that and match expanded polystyrene. I think for any of these sources, you are looking at, can you sustainably source it in a way that is beneficial to the environment and communities, and there are methods to assess that. And then you're looking at, are they technically viable to meet the performance criteria of the different products, right? Not every feedstock, not every crop can make every single plastic, so you're looking at a variety of different agricultural needs there. And then again, you wanna make sure that any of those materials can be recovered in a system, right? So we can get them back and use them again, whether that's through reuse, recycling, or compost.
So Ms. Simon, you mentioned metal as an alternative, and one of the things that came up recently that surprised me was that often aluminum cans are coated on the inside with a layer of plastic. Is that accurate, or basically when I buy beer and soda or even water in aluminum bottles, is it coated on the inside with plastic?
It depends on what's being packaged in it, right? And if it's highly acidic and corrosive. And so sometimes they have to line it if it is a highly acidic or corrosive liquid or product in there. Like
so water is not lined?
Water should not have a lining.
How about beer?
I'm not quite sure on that, but I don't believe beer has a coating in it.
Can you get us more information about what aluminum is coated and which isn't?
I don't have it with me, but I
Right.
can, yes.
And also, then what happens to that plastic when the aluminum is recycled that is coated?
It's just melting in the process.
So it basically becomes vapors that basically get exhausted and affect the local community?
It can be if there is not good air and quality management coming out of those recycling facilities. Aluminum
Dr.
is,
Erickson? Oh,
yeah,
okay.
sorry.
I want to turn back to the bioplastics. And when you talked about them breaking down, I mean, in my head, when I see something made out of bamboo or some other wood product, I'm kind of like, oh, okay, well, nature's been dealing with wood for 1 billion years, so I'm pretty comfortable it's not going to break down into stuff that has various chemicals in it that will affect the environment. But I am concerned about whether the bioplastics that break down in these different experiments, they may become very tiny, but do they become kind of microplastics that might still affect the ecology different than if they were made from cellulose?
That very much depends on the additives, depends on the properties you want. Like often they'll do laminates. Like right here, you'll see some where we're laminating different biomaterials to increase the water vapor barrier. With those, as those begin to degrade, if the biomaterial degrades, if there's a metal layer or a polyethylene layer, that's going to degrade also and produce microplastics. If there are additives that are UV inhibitors, for example, or other chemicals, those toxins may also leach off as the biomaterial degrades. So it really depends on what kind of additives you're putting into it. In some cases, though, there are no additives. Like, for example, this one straw that's here and this bit of film, you can use the pure material in some packaging applications. And when they degrade, there are no toxic legacy materials left behind.
Which should be our goal.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Carper.
Thanks again. Thanks again for just a terrific hearing, and again for all of you for joining us. This is timely and important. Aaron Simon, I'm going to pick on you again, and with no malice intended. But if you probably ask most of my colleagues here in the Senate about green guides, that we wouldn't know what to say. Our staff on this committee, they'd know, but I think most of my colleagues, including me at one time, would not have any idea what they're talking about. But as you know, about every 10 years, the Federal Trade Commission updates its guide for the use of environmental marketing claims. It's also known as green guides. The green guides provide guidance for producers to label their products as they can label them as recyclable, they can label them as compostable, or they can label them as environmentally friendly. Unfortunately, the green guides have not been updated, I'm told, since 2012. It's like 11 years. A lot has changed in 11 years. And the market for new packaging alternatives is rapidly evolving as well. This has led to manufacturers making claims that are sometimes misleading about whether an alternative package is recyclable or whether it's compostable or neither. This is why earlier this year, some of my colleagues and I, colleagues on this committee actually, and I wrote to the Federal Trade Commission, and we encouraged them to update these green guides. And it's been long enough. In fact, it's been too long. Ms. Simon, how can updating the green guides help reduce consumer confusion on what types of products are recyclable, what are compostable, and what are more sustainable?
Yeah, we too were happy to see that the green guides were being updated, and WWF was a part of that process. Much of my testimony echoes what we wrote in the green guides. We need to evaluate where materials are coming from and have verification and accountability for where they end up. The green guides can really start by ensuring that materials that are claimed to be recyclable, compostable, or more sustainable actually are. This means allowing only specified formats of materials which a majority of the country has access to recycling can be called recyclable, right? Not just technical recyclable, but access to. With compostable, we need a definition that ensures consumers know where to put compostable items, and that compost streams are either industrial, where someone picks them up from your house, or home compostable, where, according to ASTM standards, where those products will break down in anyone's backyard.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I like to quote Winston Churchill. Winston Churchill was a great hero of World War II, carried the British people on his back to victory over the Germans and with our help. And gosh, less than a year after he was just a hero, the voters of Great Britain threw him out. And they put somebody else in as prime minister. And Winston Churchill was leaving 10 Downing Street, moving out. And the press was there, and one of them asked him, said, for you, Mr. Churchill, is this the end? He said, is this the end? And famously, he said, this is not the end. It's not the beginning of the end. He said, this is the end of the beginning, the end of the beginning. Lenny Kravitz, probably a relative of yours, Berto, quite a well-known entertainer in his own right. Once had a hit that you sort of paraphrased Churchill. And I think the name of his hit, I don't know if he's a one-hit wonder or not. I think he had a couple. But one of his more popular songs is the lyric, it ain't over till it's over. And the debate and the conversation on this topic is going to be going on for a while, and I'm delighted that we're doing it, and I'm delighted that you're all doing it with us. And that leads me into my question on federal legislative action. We've enjoyed, I think I speak for my colleagues and me, we've enjoyed hearing about each of your respective efforts to consider material alternatives to plastic within your respective fields and industries. Here's my question. While we know that there is a whole suite of policy options available to us, would each of you share the top legislative action that you believe Congress should take within, say, the next year to help our country address the plastics crisis? And we'll turn to a relative descendant of Lenny Kravitz to respond first to that question.
Thank you for the question. So I think that the criteria, first and foremost, has to be performance-based. So not looking at specific technology in its own merits, but comparative to other types of technologies. And that's when innovative companies like mine can actually rise to the challenge of meeting those standards. That's one thing. And maybe the second thing is on the materials, when we're talking about replacing one material with another one, we do have to look at the total carbon footprint that each material has. There are materials that are better than plastics, others that are not. So let's not fall into a blame game, but let's try to figure out with performance-based technologies and full carbon footprint of competitive materials, which ones are best for what situation.
All right, thank you. Ms. Simon, same question. What maybe would be the top legislative action that you feel Congress should take within the next year or so to help our nation address the plastics crisis?
I believe that extended producer responsibility can really connect the creation of these materials, no matter what they are, to their end of life through transparency, design standardization, and financial models. It can really help us to reimagine the linear economy so that everyone can have access to those recycling systems, and we can make sure that we're getting those materials back and increasing economic growth. In fact, later today, I'll be in the same room talking with some corporate partners and where they'll be advocating for extended producer responsibility also.
Thanks. Dr. Erickson.
And I wrote something similar to EPR. I think an EPR bill would allow the companies who are making materials that become waste participate financially in the recovery and management of those materials. Also, a bottle bill, a national bottle bill, and I think that would go a long way to getting back the material from the environment.
All right, good. Thank you. Abraham Lincoln was once asked, what is the role of government? And he replied famously, the role of government is to do for the people what they cannot do for themselves. On this committee, we're oftentimes looking for how do we harness market forces in order to achieve something good for the people of this country, maybe the good of the world. And we talked about incentives and so forth during the course of this hearing, but I'm always looking for ways to harness market forces. If anybody has a thought, there's still a closing thought on market forces, I would welcome that. Please, Dr. Erickson.
Having been in this issue for about 2 decades, I've met so many young entrepreneurs and innovators that are on the front end are creating businesses in the reuse and refill economy and biomaterials. I think those market forces, I think, can reduce the amount of waste that's in the waste stream, especially the harm that we see coming from single-use plastics. So those 2 market drivers, I think those business models are powerful.
Good, thank you. Ms. Simon?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would build on that. Innovation is not going to just happen in the materials and the technologies. It's going to be in the systems to manage them. We've seen the shared economy really grow. Low water and energy cleaning technologies for reuse systems expanding. So I believe that there's a lot of desire to solve this with unique and innovative solutions. And I think between new technologies to recycle and new technologies and systems for reuse, we have a good opportunity to get there. And there's a lot of science that says that that will happen if we sort of pull all the levers that we have.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that the concept of changing waste plastic into usable plastic is key. The incentives towards consumers to change this is key. Industry-wide, there's a lot more collaboration going on, and anywhere from design for recycling to changing the concept that something can be recycled, but it's not recyclable, or something can be recyclable, but it's not really recycled. So that is going to make a difference. The incentives have to be on actually giving value to the plastic so that it doesn't end up in the environment in the first place, and build on technologies that can scale and change this paradigm of plastic waste versus used plastic.
All right, thank you. Mr. Chairman, this has been timely and I think well attended, and we appreciate very much all the work that all of you do and sharing your thoughts with us this morning.
Thank you, Chairman Carper. And you quoted Churchill and Lincoln, but what reverberates in my mind is a quote from that esteemed public leader, Senator Carper, which is, "Do more of what works and less of what doesn't," which sums up kind of a strategy. I wanted to return to a moment to this conversation about plastic bags and whether they're single-use or not. And nationally, less than 10% of plastic bags are recycled. And very few places in the country can you put plastic bags into a bin. And if it does, the wind blows them out, but they don't take them. Then what is happening is stores in some places say, you can bring them back to us, and we will find a way for them to be sent somewhere where they'll be turned into new plastic bags, possibly plastic lumber is what I'm seeing. But essentially, at this moment, it is inefficient to recycle plastic bags. They don't get recycled. So they end up going into, into the landfills. Or they get blown away and end up in the ecosystem, as we see from this. I keep coming back to that display and thinking about all the other pictures I've seen of plastic building up in the guts of turtles, seals, dolphins, whales, etc. And now you've added camels, which I hadn't seen before, on land. Have we ever seen, Dr. Erickson, a problem where essentially animals are digesting wood and ending up with the same sort of problem in their gut?
Well, if you think these animals actually, they forage on wood. They forage on acacia trees and leaves, and they digest those just fine. Many hoofstock animals, ruminants, are eating plant material and cellulose and digesting it when they can or passing it when they can't. So those natural materials have been consumed by life for millions of years. This is a new material that doesn't work in those systems.
Thank you. To my point, you never see a picture of a gut cut open and it's full of wood, because animals have evolved in a world where we have plant-based material, and they either eat it and digest it or they don't eat it. So it's not an issue. So one of the things that we do know is often globs of plastic look like they may possibly be more edible items. For example, sea turtles that think that they're jellyfish, and so forth. And so one of the advantages of trying to find cellulose-based products is, one, on the front end, they're not made from fossil gas. Our fossil gas systems, our methane gas systems, they have a huge impact on climate just in the distribution of the gas before the plastic's ever made in the first place. And then, under the existing systems of chemical recycling, they use a tremendous amount of heat. Mr. Kravitz, you may have a different system. We'll get back to you in a couple of years and see what we've learned about the application of that technology. But essentially, the pyrolysis strategy produces another round of carbon and basically chemical fumes that are highly cancer-causing. And then they're basically burned, and you have another round of carbon production and pollution. So you have 3 rounds of carbon production and pollution in basically utilizing plastic in the first place, which is why we're holding this hearing about alternatives to plastic. And I was struck that last week Britain said its utensils are now going to be non-plastic utensils. Are either of you familiar with that, and are they allowing bioplastics, or are they turning to wood?
I'm not familiar with that.
I know in my last trip overseas, visiting my daughter, the utensils I saw were all wood. But I'm not sure of how they actually being implemented. And I think that mainland Europe has already moved in this direction as well. I did look up what it would cost if we were to utilize wood here. And right now, a plastic utensil costs about 2 cents, is what I found. Excuse me, a wood utensil. But again, this idea on the front end, if we can avoid fossil gas, if we can produce a product that if it does end up discarded, it doesn't cause the problems in the ecosystem that plastic products cause, it's a big advantage. To this debate between, if you will, a bag made of paper that is cellulose or one made of plastic, I'd always vote for the bag made of paper because cellulose does not produce the problems, because the world has been plant material has been part of the world, as you put it, from the beginning. Any other insights any of you would like to add on the upfront strategy of replacing single-use plastics with alternative materials? Ms. Simon?
I would just say that if we're going to move to an alternative material like forest-based cellulose, that we should be doing so in a thoughtful manner, sourcing it either from recycled content and or Forest Stewardship Council certified forests, so we know that those working forests are managed to be renewable for future generations.
And one of the products I've seen most commonly used in this regard is bamboo, because bamboo can grow on very quickly. It can be done in kind of a plantation-style production as opposed to harvesting natural forests for wood. And I think that the responsible thinking about that life cycle is what you're pointing to.
That bamboo can be considered a part of Forest Stewardship Council too. It just has to be, you just have to address any land conversion to the bamboo plantation in the first place. But there are ways to mitigate those risks.
Yes. And as we know, every strategy has impacts. The point is to evaluate all of them collectively in order to understand the broader picture of minimal impact. You know, we wrestle with this in renewable energy. A solar panel takes up land space. A wind turbine can kill birds, and it disturbs the view shed. And it requires electric lines to connect it. And there's nothing that doesn't have an impact. Our goal is to find the minimum, most sustainable strategy. That is the undertaking. Mr. Erickson, is there anything else you would like to add?
You know, I look through a lens of harm. Where is the harm in the environment and to human health? And it always comes back to single-use plastic materials and some of the chemistry associated with those, the additives. So that's why I often talk about the upstream, as you have. On the front end, the reusable materials, the refill, the reuse, and some of these bio-based or biodegradable materials, just to capture those costs. And yes, it is more expensive on the front end. I think you do the total life cycle assessment, the true cost of managing all this waste and the harm it causes, which was often hard to put a price tag on, it really warrants the front-end mitigations that we've talked about.
No, we've had a lot of testimony in this committee about plastic breaking down into microplastics, how it ends up in our bodies, and now in every aspect of our bodies, and that often has endocrine disruptors, chemicals in it that affect public health. Have we ever heard of cellulose breaking down to microcellulose and affecting human health? No, thank you. Back to my point that we have a product that is creating huge human health issues, and it's creating huge ecological issues, and to the degree we can replace it on the front end with something that doesn't create those health issues, we're in a much better place. I do look forward to more detailed information in this committee about other alternatives that are being produced. On the front end, I mentioned that we have innovators who are using different plant materials such as mushrooms or seaweed. There is my colleague, Senator Mullen, has a company in Oklahoma called Utopia Plastics. It is using a plant material to make straws that harden when they're in water so they don't collapse like a paper straw. I have no idea if it's biodegradable or not, but the point is many small businesses are experimenting with approaches, and our goal in public policy is to understand what approaches, when viewed in their entirety, are having the least impact and make the most sense. And so that will continue to be a topic of exploration for the committee. Thank you very much for bringing your knowledge and experience to bear. With that, I think there's some closing comments I need to make. In closing, I ask unanimous consent to submit for the record a variety of materials that include letters from stakeholders and other materials that relate to today's hearing. Is there an objection? Hearing none, those materials will be put into the record. Senators will be allowed to submit written questions for the record through the close of business on Thursday, November 9th. We'll compile those questions. We'll send them to all of you. And if you can reply to us by November 30th, that would be helpful for us to wrap up the record of the hearing. And with that, the committee is adjourned. Thank you.